lounging, son.
All right, welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name is Ryan, and with me today I have a very special guest. I have Brian Hibbs, retailer, comic book retailer, has been doing it for over 30 years. Excited to have him on the show. Definitely want to pick his brain, talk, the retail aspect. I've worked at a shop myself, so I've kind of mentioned it, but I don't know nearly as much as you do. So I'm very excited to have you on the show, man. Welcome.
Thanks, man. Glad to be here.
So, everybody that I have on the show, I always like to hear like kind of how the fandom started. And I usually ask how that led into the creative aspect of comics. But you are on the retail side. So I'd love to hear how, your fandom started, and in turn, what made you decide on April 1st of 1989 to join, do the retail thing.
Sure. I think like many kids of my age, I first discovered comics, at a corner grocery store. The first one that I remember reading vividly, it's not the first comic I read, but the first one I remember reading vividly was an issue of Justice League of America that was like one of those like 100-page giants. And on the cover was Santa Claus dead in the snow with the Justice League all standing around him. And yeah, there's a lot of weird things that happened in that comic book, man. I remember that and I didn't really know the characters at that point. I remember the Hal Jordan Green Lantern was taking a shower at the very beginning of the issue, and he slipped in a bar of soap and knocked himself unconscious, and his ring flew off his hand and went, "Must find the alternate Green Lantern," and went and found John Stewart, the alternate Green Lantern, and made him Green Lantern. And so that was the Green Lantern for this adventure. And then because it was a 100-page giant, like the back of the comic had a bunch of Justice Society reprints. So like here I am, 8 years old, 9 years old, whatever, going, why are there three Green Lanterns and two different Flashes, and they don't look the same? And what do these guys have to do with each other? And like something inside of my limbic system just lit up with like, well, this is, I clearly must know more about this and must figure this out.
The age you were when you opened the store, but like as you got older, and obviously the industry grew in terms of, a lot of the independent publishers in the 80s and stuff, you got into the retail aspect after the black and white boom kind of happened in the mid 80s. So what kind of prompted you to do the retail side of things?
I was pretty young when I first started working retail. I was, 16, 17, something like that. I just happened to pass by a comic store that had had a help wanted sign. Within, 3 months, I was the manager of that store. And within 3 months of that, I was the manager of the 3-store chain. But I knew I could do it better. I knew I could do it better than the guy who was the owner of the store. Just as sort of a real quick example, anytime he gave you a paycheck, you had to cash it through the cash register. You couldn't take it to the bank. If you took it to the bank, it would bounce. And so, pretty early on, I went, I can do better than this. Let me do it. And so by the time I was 21, I actually opened my own store. Yeah.
That's crazy. That's awesome, man. I mean, that's like, I've worked in comic book stores like since I was probably 13, like store credit or whatever, before I could legally work, and started a little bit before the pandemic, and I've worked through there, and now I'm only there part-time. But I mean, owning a comic book store has always been one of my dreams. That's always been like one of my goals. So it's cool to hear you saying that you started at 21. I didn't realize you were that young starting out.
Yeah, no, I was young and dumb, and and that probably helped to my advantage, because if I had realized what I was getting myself into, I may not have done it. But yeah, no, I mean, it's I often think that opening a comic book store is in many ways like trying to build a clubhouse that you want to hang out in, right? You stock it the way you want to buy stuff, and you make it cool to people who are cool for you, and yeah, it's a pretty good feeling overall.
And how did you, so like I said, you started in 89, so this is before the onset of Image and kind of the height of the speculator boom. How did you kind of weather through that? How did you, like, I mean, from what I've read and heard, obviously I know Wizard magazine was like a huge huge component of that. So, I mean, a lot of stores closed down, and even from when I was a kid, there was a lot more comic book stores, and I'm from LA. There's a lot more than there are now, and it's kind of whittled down. I mean, you'll see some pop up and they close. So how did you weather that type of chaos and come out the other side?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is that the other store that I worked at, we went through the black and white boom, right, and bust. And so I had already seen what happened when speculators came in and were buying things that weren't actually based on the quality of the work, but based upon just trying to make money and flipping the books. Now, of course, flipping back then was very different than flipping these days is, right? People didn't, when people were flipping books, they were looking at like, I'm going to buy it now and I'll sell it in 6 months. Whereas now you're buying it and selling it in 24 hours, right? Different world with the pre-internet. But I had seen what had happened, and I had seen how that broke down and it didn't work. So I was at least partially emotionally prepared for that part of the process. What was the second part of the question? I actually had a good answer there.
It was, how you weathered through that storm and, came out the other side when so many other stores kind of couldn't.
Yeah. So that was the thing I was going to say, is that when I opened in San Francisco, there were 24 different comic book stores. And now today there are now 6. So I have seen stores come and go. I've seen what happens. How did I weather it? I mean, I don't want to sound snotty, but I did it by just running the best store that I could. I just tried to run the place that I wanted to shop at and just trust that that was what it was. I think I have a small advantage in that I don't necessarily care about any specific genre or like, I'm not a Marvel guy, right? I'm not a superhero guy. I just like comics. I like the medium of comics, the entire medium of comics. And, that allows us to lean into a much more, audience friendly, audience centric kind of way of doing it, which helps you survive, because you're not tied to whatever the minute of the trend is, right? The reason that stores went out of business during the black and white bust, and then let's call it the Image Valiant bust after that, is because those stores went crazy deep on those kinds of books. They effectively acted as speculators the same way their customers were. Customers are buying 10 copies of black and white comics. Well, I'll buy 100 so that way I can get ahead of this. And then, I can only sell 90. And that's when you go out of business, right? No store ever goes out of business from the massive loss. I find stores go out of business by what we call the death of 1,000 paper cuts. It's buying this book and buying that book and buying that book, and then at the end of the day, you go, oh my God, I've got a whole lot of comics that I can't sell sitting around, right? So you just got to you've got to be a mile wide and an inch deep, is how I've always done it.
So did you early on see that this was going down, and you did not buy into any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was pretty fucking obvious. I mean, it was obvious that it couldn't last, and it wasn't based on truth. One of the things you were talking about earlier again was how many stores shut down. There, yes, the industry went from, I don't remember exactly what the number was, but something like 5,000 stores or 7,000 stores down to 2 or 3. But a lot of those stores weren't really comic book stores, right? Like, they were stores that had been encouraged by Diamond and Capital and all the other distributors to open up an account because the previous boom had happened. And it was like, oh, well, you can cash in, right? Oh, you're some card store. We'll put a rack of comics in, and then Wizard Magazine came along and told everybody what was hot. And then those stores would buy tons of copies of all those books. And then sometimes it would work, but other times it really wouldn't. It's pretty obvious to see that was what was going on, though.
All the distributors, right? There's multiple distributors. I mean, we're kind of seeing that return. I don't know. It feels like the 90s is like, if there's such a mirror of that era, and then what's happening now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different today, because today we have 3 distributors for periodical comics, but each one of them has exclusives that you can only buy from them. So if you want to buy DC Comics, you must buy them from Lunar. You have no other choice. If you want to buy Marvel Comics, you're almost certainly going to be buying them paying a Random House because it's so much cheaper.
Right.
If you want Image, you have to buy them from Diamond. So that wasn't how it was then. When I opened up the store, there were at least 15 different distributors. So there were really only probably 3 or 4 options that were actually viable in the Bay Area. But it was your choice where you bought from, right? It wasn't that I have to buy from this company. It was I want to buy from this company, which is a very different world to live in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially over the pandemic, the way Lunar popped up out of nowhere, I know that, you know, being in the retail aspect, and a lot of retailers were pissed off about it, you know, just kind of out of nowhere coming out. And then, you know, paying in Random House, their shipping issues that they had at the beginning, you know, I think it just seems kind of chaotic if you're behind the scenes, but it doesn't, like, to the outsider, they don't know. But getting like 60% of your Marvel books and they're all bent and the incentive variants and all that stuff, it's just, like I said, it's just pretty crazy how it's somewhat mirroring what I read about and didn't really experience because I was young. I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think there are probably some similarities. You know, Marvel tried to do their own distribution, and so they bought a distributor called Heroes World, which was a small then regional distributor in Jersey, who was really only used to dealing with the tri-state, you know, New York area. And then they found out essentially like they could not handle scaling up to become a national distributor. So there were similar kinds of supply chain issues and things that there are right now. But, you know, each set of problems is its own different thing, right? The problem is, I think, is that comics have flattened in a way, right? So it used to be back in the day that we would sell at least 30 or 40 copies of every single Marvel comic that came out, no matter what it was. And when I say every single Marvel comic, I mean like when they launched the Star line with, you know, like whatever those, you know, I can't even remember the titles of those comics, but they were comics clearly aimed at children, you know, but because they said Marvel on them, we would sell 30, 40 copies, no problem. We were selling easily 300 copies of every issue of X-Men that was coming out back then. Wow. But there was one X-Men comic. Well, there were 2 X-Men comics at that point. Nowadays, you know, Marvel has 5 X-Men comics a week, probably more like 3, but still way more than they should. And they're publishing so many more titles, and they're doing it in, you know, what I would say to be largely inefficient ways to growing the marketplace, where they're leaning very heavily on variant covers and trying to get a fan of a thing to buy 5 times as much rather than finding 5 new fans, right? So back then, it was easier to bring in new readers, right? Because there was still a narrowness of the kind of product, but you could get, people used to, like, literally, there were things called Marvel zombies, guys who would buy every single Marvel comic that came out every single week because they were that into it. We haven't had a Marvel zombie in, you know, 15 years probably, except for like some, you know, crazy rich guy, right? But for the most part, people can't afford to keep up on it. You can't even afford to keep up on every Spider-Man comic, let alone every Marvel comic, you know? And I think that just fractures the audience in a lot of ways. The other big problem that you have with the Marvel and DC universes particularly is that because both of them are leaning so heavily on media, movies and television and things like that, it takes away from the comics in some pretty direct ways, you know? I like to say that, you know, The Flash may or may not be a good television show, but if you want to see the Flash, like the guy who runs really fast, doing stuff where he's running really fast, it looks better on television than it does in a comic book, right? And that television comes into your house. You don't pay anything for it. All you have to do is turn the television on and it's free and you get to watch it. It's harder to compete with a comic book in that form. It's one of the reasons why I'm glad that myself and most of the other stores that I know that are doing well, selling to readers, have done so from diversifying, the genres that we carry, the styles, the artists, the whole thing, because that's really where you grow an audience.
Yeah, I mean,
Hard to grow an audience when there's 17 Spider-Man titles. That's all.
I mean, yeah, and the 20 Batman titles that come out on a weekly basis too. I mean, I think that's something that I noticed even just going through my collection. Yes, it was the 90s. Yes, there was a glutton of titles, but there was also more obscure characters that we don't get now. So instead of a Spectre book, we get another Batman book. Instead of a Green Arrow book, we get another Joker book, and then same thing with Marvel, right? Like way too much X-Men, in my opinion. They relaunched the line. I'm like, okay, this is cool. Hickman's writing X-Men. It's going to be great. But then title. I'm like, dude, I don't even want to read all this. Like, that's just, it's not even appealing.
And you're not the only one. I mean, certainly, again, when Hickman came out with Hoxpox, House of X, Powers of X, comic book retailer, you start talking in jargon. But when Hickman came out with Hoxpox, I mean, our X-Men sales went up. I want to say it was something like 7 or 8 times from what they were before. Mm-hmm. And we had all of these people come in and out of the woodwork like, oh yeah, I used to read X-Men and I got off the thing, but I heard it's really good now. We were like, yeah, it's really good right now. And then they started launching all of the spin-off titles, and most of that new audience, not new, I mean, it was a returned audience rather than a new audience, but most of them walked away, We're selling more X-Men today than we were before Hickman, but not by a crazy amount, because they overdid it. They went too deep to the well, there is such a thing as too much,
I agree. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just like you trying to find space on the shelf. And I'm like, for me is like setting up the shelves. I'm like, dude, I'm running out of room. Like, this is literally just an X-Men section, and there's just not enough titles. And then you're buying, then like the numbers, I know that had to have been hard too, kind of guessing how many copies of each title, because like not everybody's going to want Marauders, or not everybody's going to want Excalibur. And then doing the numbers before you even see the numbers, the return on number 1, like you're already ordering 2 because they're double shipping. Like, it was just a nightmare. It's crazy. That's something else I wanted to, around the same time, right? Like Hoxpox, like you said, that came out, I want to say shortly, I can't remember the exact time, but it was shortly before the pandemic. When a lot of retail comics were shut down, a lot of people uncertain what was going to happen. What's the industry going to look like when there's no comic books coming out? How can stores stay afloat? I think this is when you started your graphic novel club. Is that correct? Or did
no, actually, I started it 7 years ago. So
oh shit! All right, I'm completely
wrong. Time ago. We started the clubs because minimum wage in San Francisco went to $16. Well, it was $15 an hour then. It's now $16.32. Okay. And that's a lot of things you have to sell in order to make that money.
That's a lot of money.
Pay people, and I realized, I voted for the law because I believe in it, but I also did the math for my store and went, yeah, we're not going to be in business in about 2 years if this keeps up. So, we had to find a new revenue stream, and we did it with the Graphic Novel of the Month clubs. What's good is that when the pandemic hit, we already had something in place, right? And while we had been doing the author appearances in person in the store, we were still live streaming them already at that point. So it wasn't a hard move for us to switch everything to just being live streamed. We were already used to the mechanics of it. We were used to the tools. It wasn't a big challenge, thankfully. I think that if I had tried to start the clubs post-pandemic, I'm not sure they would have succeeded nearly as well.
But it's safe to say that something like that definitely helped funnel in money to the stores when there was no new product, right? What was the decision to, like, you have multiple clubs. Can you talk a little bit about the different book clubs that you have? I know you have the YA, and then I'm kind of curious, like, why not just one book? Why you do 3, right? Yeah.
So the first one, the original idea, the original thought, again, I said that, the minimum wage was about to raise, and there was another bookstore, a science fiction bookstore here in town, that also came to the same conclusion that we did. that they weren't going to be able to make it work. So they decided to have a sort of a community meeting where they invited all the customers in just to talk it out. And I decided to attend just to see if they came up with anything, if it gave me any good ideas. None of their ideas worked for me, but the person I was sitting next to was someone who hung around the store, but wasn't like a regular normal customer, right? Like she just came to our parties and stuff. And she turned to me and she said, you know, if you just gave me a book every month and said, this is the book you have to buy, I would buy it. And I mean, literally, one of those cartoon light bulbs went off over my head. I was like, that's a really good idea. Let's try that. So yeah, the first idea was to do a graphic novel of the month club for a new book for adults. And then as I was setting that up, I got an email from a librarian who's like, this is such a good idea. Hey, have you ever thought about doing it for kids? Second fucking light bulb. Bing! Wow, that's a really good idea. And it was even the better idea because we have way more members of the kids club than we do of the adult club. It's the really funny thing. So we started with the two clubs to do it. When COVID came along, I realized, again, we needed more money and more cash flow. And so we started the third club, which we call the Comix Masterpiece Club. So the adult club is a new book that's released basically that month or maybe a month before. With the Comix Masterpiece Club, I can go and I can do the whole history of comics. And so, it's sort of all the comics of all time, and we've been lucky enough to be able to interview Neil Gaiman and Garth Ennis and Kurt Busiek and Scott McCloud and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just a lot of really big names that we wouldn't necessarily have been able to do, if it hadn't been the Classics Club.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely like intriguing to me because like even if you've read comic books, like I've read comic books over 25 years, and you can still discover stuff that you never maybe paid attention to, or it was an oversight, right? So I think that that's really interesting that you did it, and I love that you're interviewing the creators, and definitely something. Do you think that also having the book club, but also all the relationships that you've built with the creators over the years has kind of elevated the clubs and made it more intriguing to the consumer?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Certainly I don't know that Neil Gaiman or Garth Ennis would necessarily have talked to me if I hadn't gone out drinking with them many times over the years, or whatever. And so yeah, I mean, I think that definitely helps. And I think that the fact that our interviews are not necessarily straight up interviews, they're more conversations, They try to be just chats between friends whenever I can. I think that gives it a kind of a different tenor than a lot of the kind of comic book conversations that you see. And yeah, I think it works really well. And if any of your members are curious about it at all, graphicnovelclub.com/start, and that will take you to a page that shows you all the stuff that we do and how we do it. We do signed book plates by the authors that are original and unique to the store, as well as the live stream interviews. The kids club, they get buttons and magnets. And yeah, I think it's a pretty cool program, honestly, because again, the real point is to show the whole panoply of what comics are and what they can be, and we're not focused on a genre, we're not focused on one type of thing. My genuine hope is that every month you're going to be surprised by the book that you get, and that will make you love comics even more. It seems like it's working.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that not maybe I don't want to say the majority, but a lot of the public, like if they're not familiar with comics, they just see superheroes, and there's comic books, like you said at the top of the episode, you love the medium of comics. That's how I feel. Like no comic book is something that I won't take a chance on. I will take a chance on anything, whether it's YA, whether it's, Fantagraphics, Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, whatever. It doesn't matter what publisher it is. If you tell me it's good, I'm going to check it out. And I think that you doing that and you talking about that, and you not like it, you don't just, it's not like, oh, here's this superhero graphic novel club.
Yeah.
Like you're just you spotlight stuff that you think is cool. How how do you think about, like, when you're curating stuff for your store, when you're curating the graphic novel clubs, what are you thinking about? What are you trying to do on a monthly basis, on a daily, on a weekly basis in your shop and with the club?
Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to spotlight the best comics, right? And I'm blessed with a really good staff who also have really good tastes in comics. And we talk about the work, and we talk about what we like and what we don't like, and what can we expose people to, and so it's a pretty communal atmosphere to be able to curate this stuff. It's not just me making, old man says buy this, right? Like, it's the whole staff. I've got 20-year-olds, I've got 30-year-olds, I'm 50 something, yeah, we're just trying to really show people what comics are and what comics can do. But that's literally what we do all day in the store, right? People come in and go, the most common thing we hear is what's good, and so, yeah, we have a lot of answers for that. And we try to see what it is that people like, and we listen. We're not stuck in our own opinions of what's good. We listen to what other people say is good, and we experiment and we try, and we don't always agree, but being able to, to have that as wide of a palette as you possibly can is the best way to go.
Yeah, I think that, you kind of said, like, maybe you don't agree with an opinion on a book that other people like. I think that has been, like, when I was younger, especially, the experience that you can have going into a comic book store when someone behind the counter is like, why are you reading that? That book is trash, or something like that. You have those bad experiences. I haven't had that in a long time. But that's kind of like what I love about going to your shop. And that's why the thought
wait, you like the bad experience going to a shop?
No. I said that what I like about going into a shop is being able to talk to the people behind the counter. I've gone into shops that people are like, oh man, this store is awesome, it's one of the best shops, and I left there saying, no, it really wasn't. Like, the people were not that friendly behind the counter. I asked a question and they didn't really even try to answer it,
Yeah.
So, like, I, as somebody that works at a comic shop, like, I try to, like, give the best experience I can to the person coming in. When somebody that I recommend a book to comes back later that day, or later that week, and is like, man, that was awesome, what else do you have for me? That is the best feeling. That is why I work in a comic book shop.
Exactly.
Like, turning people on to comic books, to stuff that they didn't know that they would like. That's what it's about to me, and I think that hearing you talk, I mean, obviously you don't stay in business over 30 years unless you're curating a cool shop, you're bringing in people that love comic books and are sharing that love with the people that walk through that door on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, that's for sure what we're trying to get at. I mean, I often tell the staff our job is to find the things that we like, and then set people on fire with our minds about it. Oh, did you read this? Oh man, it's so cool, and it's cool for this reason and that reason and that reason. And then they get excited. They get excited from your excitement, right? And the best is when you find that kind of a book, and it doesn't happen very often. Saga is probably the most recent example, and before that, it was 20 years before it was Sandman. But the kind of a book where everybody seems to like it, and so when you set one person on fire, they go and set 2 more people on fire, and then they set 2 more people on fire, and then all of a sudden you're standing in this forest fire that you helped create. I mean, well, not a fire, but you know what I mean. But it's the greatest feeling. I mean, it really is that your enthusiasm for things has spread in that kind of a way, and that, particularly with the clubs, that we're able to take some books that are, probably not on people's radar, and show them, wow, look at this cool thing that you never would have even thought about or seen or heard of. And then they're like, that was the coolest thing I've ever read. Wow, give me more. The greatest feeling.
I know. I try to explain it to my wife, and she doesn't understand it. Like I said, that's why I do the channel. That's why I do my YouTube channel. That's why I spotlight books or creators that I dig, because maybe you know, maybe I turn one person onto it, but if I turn one person onto a book or a creator, then I feel like I've succeeded, you know. And I think that it's just what I love about comic books. Comic books are, I could find a comic book for anybody, and you can't really say that for everything, you know what I mean? Like, not everybody can like a, you know, a specific, I'm trying to think of something to correlate it to, but like, not everybody is into music, I guess you could say, right? Like, you can't, some people just don't care for it. They could care less, or TV or movies or whatever. But I could find a story in a comic book for any type of person. And I think that that's what is, I don't want to say magical, but that's the magic of comic books to me, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's not just, you know, type of story, but it's also type of person. Like, every type of person, there's I can find a comic for your 8-year-old, and I can find a comic for your 80-year-old, and I can find one for every person in between. There's and that's the great thing about comics, the medium, right? Stores that carry a wide variety of stock and that have that level of attention, like, we're able to do that missionary work in, I think, a pretty amazing way, actually, you know. That, again, I agree with you. You don't really see it in most other kind of media's stores, you know. Certainly at a lot of, you know, a lot of bookstores or whatever, it's just people taking a job, and they don't actually really connect and really get it, you know. But in comics, it everyone we hire, it seems like, is just, they're comics people. That's what they are, right? And there's nothing else they'd rather be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody goes to comic store that's just like trying to get a job. You have to like comic books if you're walking in the door looking for a job. I do want to, another question I wanted to ask you, in terms of like I said, you've seen so many ups and downs. It's a fucking roller coaster, this industry, just in my lifetime. And you often hear creators say like, oh, 5 years from now there won't be an industry. Like, that's something that I've heard a lot of, like, in interviews I've read, like, oh, 5 years from now there's not going to be comics, right? What do you see in terms of ways to kind of grow readership, to kind of grow the industry? Do you think that sticking to comic book specialty stores is kind of where it should be, or do you think they should expand in terms of where we can buy product as well?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is that ever since 1989, I've been hearing people say comic stores are closing in 5 years. I'm literally not kidding about that. I have heard that every single year since 1989. People have been, it's 5 years, and then we're done. We're not done. We're not anywhere close to done. Comics are right now, at this moment in time, the best they've ever been, as far as I'm concerned. And every year they seem to get better. There are so many good works that are in print right now. There's so much material being done in so many genres and so many styles. I have nothing but hope and positivity for the future, particularly when you look at the YA space. You know, the history is that you like comics when you're kind of like 7 to, I don't know, 14 or 15, and then you discover girls, or you discover cars, or you discover just being an adult, growing up, and you go, oh, comics, that's kid stuff, and you walk away from it. And then you come back, like, when you're like 19 or 20, going, oh yeah, I really liked comics, didn't I? You know, and then you get back into it as an adult. So what I think is that all of the kids today who are reading Dave Pilkey, who are reading Raina Telgemeier, who are reading this stuff that, I mean, it's foreign to me, the genres that an 8-year-old today gets to read compared to when I was 8 years old, right? When I was 8 years old, it was basically, you got Archie comics or you got superhero comics. You got a Western every once in a while, maybe a war comic, but not like Raina Telgemeier comics are autobiographical comics, you know, for the most part. They're about her living her life. And so those kids today who are reading those comics, when they come back in 8 or 10 years as adults, their expectation of what comics can be, should be, and will be is going to be light years beyond what the average comic shop is today, I think. And I just think that is going to be an incredibly powerful development. Now, to get to your broader question of where do comics belong, you know, I do think, and of course I've got a vested interest, I do think that a specialty retailer is going to do a better job than a generalist retailer. Every bookstore in America has a comic section. How many of them are well curated? Not a ton. I mean, some are, absolutely, right? But it tends to be more that you get one employee working there who's got a special, you know, a special buzz for it, and he talks to the manager into letting him take over, and they go, okay, kid, sure, you can go and do that. But a comic specialty store, right? Like it's all of my walls in the store are all comics. That's all that is around us. So I think we can spotlight a lot of smaller things, a lot of more challenging works, a lot of more fringe works. So yeah, I think comic shops per se are valuable, necessary, incredibly useful for expanding the market. But we also need those generalists out there to help anybody. You know, the thing is that comics are not yet, quite yet, thought broadly by the general population as a valid art form. We're getting there. Every day we get closer and closer and closer. But we get people coming in and people are like, oh, comics, huh? They still make these. Oh, interesting. You know, and so you need as many venues and as many places to show what the possibilities of comics are, as many generalists as possible. You know, I think that my fear with comics in pop culture is just that, you know, the superhero genre, and particularly the Marvel Cinematic Universe, has kind of taken over the average person's thought of what comics are or can be. And that is really only the slightest tip of the iceberg there. And I think it becomes especially problematic when we talk about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because the Marvel Cinematic Universe is getting farther and farther and farther away from the comics as every new movie comes along. You know, I really enjoyed Shang-Chi. I thought it was a swell movie, but it is literally nothing like Shang-Chi, the comic book character. I mean, in no way, shape, or form does the martial arts Shang-Chi shoot, you know, particle cannons from his arms. I mean, that's just not a thing in the comics. So, you know, and I think that we've had certainly people come in and go, oh yeah, I saw that Shang-Chi movie. Do you have more Shang-Chi comics? And we'll show them and they'll be like, but this is not what the movie was, you know? So
you would say that sometimes it's not always, but it can be what they do in the movies are a little detrimental to bringing in newer readers.
Detrimental is too strong of a word. It's not detrimental, but it's maybe a little bait and switchy, maybe. I don't know. You know, I think that comics are an amazing medium because of things that are specific about comics, about the audience participation in comics. Well, when you watch a movie, right, you watch a movie at 32 frames per second or whatever it is. That's how you watch a movie. You don't stop a movie and go back and reread previous scenes, right? You watch that 2-hour movie. You know, you might hit pause if you're at home, but if you're in a movie theater, you sure can't do that. Right. Comics, the audience is a part of it, right? The audience. Here's my example. Peanuts, Charles Schultz's Peanuts. Everybody in the whole wide world has read the cartoon, because he did it like 9 times, where Charlie Brown's running at the football and Lucy pulls the football away and Charlie goes flying through the air. Mm-hmm. If you actually go and read that comic strip, though, at no point does Lucy pull the football away. You see Charlie running in one panel, and then you see a panel where she has already pulled the football away, and then a third panel where he's flying. So who pulled the football away? I would say it's us that pull the football away. The audience is the one that pulls the football away. And that's not something that happens in other media. You draw conclusions in comics where you take two sometimes disparate images and you draw a conclusion between those two images. And no other medium does that. And And then when you get really talented writers like, say, an Alan Moore or Neil Gaiman, who have learned how to not just manipulate your eye, but manipulate your ear as well. You know, you think about an Alan Moore comic, which you'll be at the page turn, it'll be one image, and he'll start a sentence, and then you'll flip the page, and he'll complete the sentence, but it'll be a completely different image. And it changes the way you relate to everything that you just saw. That some film can do that, but most don't even try. And it's the power of comics, and it's the amazing thing about the genre of comics, among many other things. But it's its own language, you know, and it's a language that everybody uses whether they know it or not. Think about being on an airplane. Not that most of us have been on an airplane in the last 2 years, but the last time you were on an airplane, right? They've got the pocket card that says, here's what happens if there's an emergency. Mm-hmm. It's comics, man. It's comics showing you how you would get off the airplane with the same kind of jumps of conclusions that you would get from it. And so it's a really powerful medium. And it's one of the reasons that kids love reading comics so much. I mean, kids love reading comics. Kids, I don't want to say hate reading books, like prose books, but kids love reading comics. And when you have a reluctant reader, when you have that kid who feels daunted by reading prose, which I would say is at least a third of the kids, you know, I mean, my son's 18 now, but it wasn't that long ago that I was in there in his classroom, you know, helping out, you know, for the first grade through fifth grade or whatever. And I was like reading with kids, and a lot of the kids they were just really challenged by the idea of that wall of text and the words and drawing conclusions from it. But they don't have that with comics, because in comics you are participating in it, and so it's much easier to be a part of that. I'm kind of babbling, I think.
No, it's fine. I'm just listening. I know. I mean, you have like this wealth of knowledge that like I could listen to you for hours, dude, you know?
Thanks.
So in terms of growth, right? In terms of growing the industry, I know, like, you know, you talk about the YA genre, you know, the emergence of that and it really growing, the Scholastic alone, right? Like the book fairs. I mean, taking my daughter who is in first grade, when I took her when she's in TK before the lockdown, right? I'm like looking at her, I'm like, my God, there's comics here. When I was a kid, there was no fucking comics. Like, yeah. I was like the minority. I had no friends that liked comic books, you know, when I was a kid. And it's crazy to see that. But what else in terms of, what else besides that? Besides Scholastic kind of, you know, nurturing like the younger readers, how else do you see the industry growing further than what it is now?
Yeah, I mean, I do have to say, I think the teachers are the greatest thing of all, and librarians. And I think that it is largely a generational shift, right? So at my age of people, we were all in the shadow of the Senate hearings and Wortham, you know, and seduction of the innocent and all of that comics were bad for you, and that comics would make kids stupider, would make them juvenile delinquents. And it really took a recent generation of librarians and teachers who were observing the same things that I was just saying, that, oh, wait, no, kids actually want to read comics of their own volition, right? You don't have to talk a kid into reading Raina Telgemeier, right? Mm-hmm. You just show it to them. They're like, oh, cool. What's this? Let me start, you know? And that friction, that involvement is really powerful. And so I think that the generational locks on the value of the medium have started to change. It's going to take time. It's going to take, I think, more stores. You know, I think it also is going to take Marvel and DC kind of figuring their shit out a little bit better. I'm really concerned that Marvel and DC are now, you know, AT&T and Disney, and that the people who are in charge, not of Marvel and DC, but of AT&T and Disney, don't really give a shit about comics at all. They don't understand what it is they have or how they can use it to their advantage. And so they've given the people working at Marvel and DC instructions to maximize the amount of money you're making from it rather than maximizing the growth of the audience. If Marvel and DC were to reprioritize the growth of the audience over the growth of the dollars, I think that the dollars would grow on their own at that point. I often think that if Marvel got themselves down to a line of 6 comics a month, or sorry, 6 comics a week at the most, and there was just one Spider-Man comic, I think that one Spider-Man comic would sell 1.5 million copies every month without a problem. Whereas Spider-Man right now, I want to say, is selling 100,000 copies or less, but they've got 15 different Spider-Man books. So they're like, well, we sell 1.5 million. Well, you're not selling 1.5 million because you're only selling it to 40,000 or 60,000, 80,000 readers. That's not good. You want more readers. The more people reading in general, the better we're going to be. So that's where I think that we need to be. Now, I don't know that I have any faith that Marvel and DC are gonna do that at this point. But I certainly think that we have publishers that are making a lot of effort. I think Image, certainly. I think to a degree Boom, Dark Horse. I mean, we can name names, right? But there are people out there who sincerely believe in the medium and sincerely believe what we're doing. And we just keep growing it that way. That's what I think, at least,
Yeah, I mean, I think that Marvel and DC to getting their shit together. I mean, I didn't really I knew about it, right? But like being behind the scenes and the speculation and the variant covers, it kind of, especially dealing with the sales of it, like managing the online store, which is what I was doing, it just bleeds your soul, like,
yeah, it's gross.
It made me, I don't want to say dislike comics, because I've never disliked comics. I mean, I love comics. It's what I'm passionate about. But it really sucked the joy out of it to where I'm like, man, I think I can't work in a comic book store doing this stuff. I want to get back behind the counter. I don't want to be dealing with these people. What's hot? What are you asking me? Like, do you care about what is a good book? Like, I mean, one day I think I just lost it. I'm like, do you want a good book, or are you trying to make money, dude? Like, what is your—
No, they're trying to make money.
Yeah.
And not only are they trying to make money, but they're trying to make money by assuming that you are an idiot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they're like, they come in, they go, well, is this going to be worth money? Like, if it was going to be worth money, why would I sell it to you, dipshit? Right? Yeah. Why wouldn't I make the money? So essentially, you're trying to rook me by engaging in comics that fashion. The only thing that matters is what's between the covers, I think. And so this is one of the reasons that at my store, we have a policy where we only carry one cover on any book. Screw it. I don't want multiple covers. That I can make 10% more money, but I don't need to make 10% more money that way. I would rather get 10% more customers by hand selling them a book and exposing them to something new. I think that it's ultimately, it's a really dumb way to try to make money, because it doesn't pay off in the long run. We were talking before about flipping books, right? And how most people right now are trying to flip books and doing it immediately. That's great for the minute that it works, but like 3 weeks after that comic comes out, it's not worth anything anymore and nobody cares. I really think that that in so many cases, most of our problems can be pointed to a small number of bad actors. There's, the overwhelming majority of comic shops want readers to read comics, and then maybe 5 or maybe 10% of them at the most are all about, oh yeah, no, I want to do covers. That's my job, right? I think that those cats who who are buying their own variant cover, their own custom variant cover for their store, and they're buying 3,000 copies of a comic where normally it's a $4 comic, but they're giving Marvel or DC $6 or $7 or $8 for that comic, and then they're selling it to their customers for $20. Those guys are making money doing that. There's no doubt that they're making money doing that, but they're making money in a shitty way. And what I believe that history has shown us is not sustainable over the long course. I have watched comics nearly go out of business several times. The black and white bust, the Image bust. There's been one since then as well. It's not the way It's not the way to grow your business. And so those bad actors, I think, really change the dialogue. And of course, the big problem today is the internet. And the internet makes it really easy for bad actors to come along and go, well, I've got an app that will show you what came out this week that you should go and rush out and buy. But the app doesn't show you that the guy who's telling you that happens to own a store where he's got a lot of copies of the books that he just recommended to you. And he's trying to take advantage of you, you know? And sooner or later, the customer will figure it out, because sooner or later they will go into the store and they will go, hey, how much will you give me for these comics that I spent a lot of money on? And the store will go, nothing, buddy. They're worth a nickel a piece, man. What are you talking about? And then those customers will go, oh, I have wasted my life and my money, you know, and then it'll all crash again. You know, I'm expecting a crash, a speculation crash again, because all of the signs are there right now. All of the signs are pointing towards there's too much and there's too many people trying to make money in lazy, shitty ways, that it's going to figure itself out. The good thing with comics as they exist right now is we have graphic novels, and we have non-collectible ways to be able to get that same material out to people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that graphic novels definitely, you know, change. I mean, we could go off on that whole subject, but I think graphic novels definitely changed the game in terms of, you know, when somebody comes into the store. When I was a kid, like, they weren't as readily available. They were not reprinting every single story arc a month after it ended, right? Like, that wasn't the case. Now it's so easy. So when somebody's like, oh, I can't get it, like, just wait for the trade, man. You can still read the story. You don't go pay somebody $50 because Tim Drake came out as bisexual. Yeah. Just wait until they collect it in a trade paperback, because that's ridiculous. There's no reason that book should. I mean, I've straight up told customers, there's no reason that book should be that price. So don't ever go pay for it. You know what I mean? Like, if you just want the story, there's a way to get the story at cover price, and that's what you should do. I'm kind of curious. You know, obviously the speculator thing is going to pop again, and your educated guess. I mean, you've seen multiple times this kind of stuff happen. How much longer do you think? Because it seems like that bubble's pretty full right now, you know? What are your thoughts?
It's hard to say, because the minute it's going to happen all at once. It's not going to be, if history is any guide, it's not going to be a slow decline. It's going to be a sharp, sudden correction. It's always been a sharp, sudden correction, and it always will be, I think, at least. You know, Neil Gaiman gave a speech at a convention once where he, and this was during the Wizard years, where he was talking about 18th century Holland and in Tulip Mania. And Holland, for some reason, people suddenly decided that tulips were worth money. Go figure. And people started putting all of their money into tulips and then flipping their tulips and making more money. And then one day it all crashed, because everybody woke up and went, what the fuck are we doing? And so I think the same thing happens, you know, in any kind of collectible market. It only works, any kind of pyramid scheme only works as long as you can keep tricking people and keep fooling people and keep bringing in new rooks. But eventually you run out of people to rook, and eventually those people go, this is dumb, you know? As I say, though, the great thing about comics is that, unlike the previous times, we actually have content, and we actually have a way to have a soft landing out of this, I think.
I definitely don't see it like, I mean, Marvel went bankrupt, for God's sakes, after that bubble pop. So I mean, I don't think that'll happen necessarily, but it is, I'm hoping it ends soon, because I'm kind of over it. I mean, I don't even want to say it's a necessary evil in the ecosystem of comic books, because I just wish it didn't exist, but I'm excited for it to kind of level back out, so that I don't have to see all these videos online, these articles about why this book is $50 and all that shit. But
yeah, exactly.
I switch it back over to like some more positive stuff. Before I let you go, just a couple more questions. In the immediate future, any plans, anything exciting coming up at Comix Experience? that you want to share, and then after that, some recommendations. Anything you've read recently that you want to recommend to the listeners and watchers?
Yeah, I mean, we're not shut down. Obviously, we're not shut down at all on COVID, but things are much slower than they were. San Francisco is still, everybody has to wear a mask all the time. There's requirements, etc. We've lost most of the tourism that San Francisco is most famous for, and then the tech industry jobs, which is the other part that San Francisco is famous for. Those people are all staying at home. So things are certainly down from where they were. And so we're not really booking events and things like that at this moment as a result, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to fly people in if no one's going to show up. Having said that, the clubs are where all of our strength and all of our focus is going at the moment. Let me think. This month, the book is Time Before Time from Image Comics, the time travel story. Declan Shalvey, I think. And the rest of the guys, they're all in Ireland too. So it's going to be me and a bunch of Irish guys talking. That'll be fun. The Classics Club is Pedro and Me by Judd Winnick.
Awesome.
And talking about, his time on the MTV's The Real World, which will be amusing. And the Kids Club is Rassel Castle, which is by Colleen Coover and Paul Tobin. So that should be good. So that's this month's books. In general, what's coming up, I think that there's some, I think we're all really excited by the return of Saga. Saga, was a once in a generation kind of a book that civilians, quote unquote civilians, were really into. They weren't buying any other comics, but they really like Saga. And so, our hope is that the 3-year gap or the 4-year gap, whatever it is, the people are going to come back and find Saga again. I also think that there's some good possibilities with books like, say, Lore Olympus, which is a very, very popular webtoon that's finally coming into print now. And I have a good expectation that that's gonna break really big. But every month there's so many good new comics, every week there's great comics. So it's kind of hard to narrow it down to just a couple, if you see what I mean. It's just that if you will, that comics experience of just that all the time. Every Wednesday there's new stuff coming in. Every Wednesday there's new stuff that thrills us all and that we're happy to talk to you about, and that we're excited to turn people on to, and it's every week there's great stuff for adults, and every week there's great stuff for kids, and it's just that to me is, again, the best part of all of this, that we're not just looking at one genre ruling things. We're not just looking at one style. The growth of the kids comic to me is the most heartening thing that I can think of, because I'll tell you, when the speculation bubble pops, it's not going to be popping for kids comics. I don't think. I think that's a genuine and real thing where we're growing the future from that, and that stores that are smart are going to be able to leverage that for many, many decades to come.
That's the hope. I hope that the industry continues to thrive, and I'm very hopeful and excited for the future of comic books, and I'm so grateful that retailers like you are out there that are spreading the love and passion for the industry in such awesome ways, man. And thank you so much for chatting with me. It's been a blast talking comic books with you. And for everybody listening and watching, if you could share where we can find you, the shop, online, and I'm going to drop all the links down below in the comments.
Yeah. So the store is Comix Experience, COMIX Experience, comicsexperience.com. The graphic novel clubs, again, is graphicnovelclub.com/start, and that'll get you all the information you need about both the store and the clubs. And we're in San Francisco, so if you're in San Francisco, come on by. And if you're not, we've got a web store, but it's not as exciting. Shop at your local comic shop. That's what I got.
All right, cool, man. Well, again, thank you so much. And if I would definitely love to chat comics with you again in the future if you're up for it, man.
You know where to find me, Ryan.
All right, cool. Thank you.
All right, Ryan. Be cool.
You too.